After 2 years of disrupted learning, it comes down to this. And Rachel Imadi wanted to bring mum Patricia along for support, for the opening of an envelope that could determine her future.
It's that. 3 stars.
What did you get, Rachel?
3 stars.
3 A stars, that's brilliant. That's really good.
Oh my God!
After COVID closures and limited lessons, for Rachel, her results mean even more.
I think studying within the pandemic was hard because of social and academic changes.
Is it a bit annoying when everyone keeps saying, oh, it's just grade inflation?
Yeah, people are saying it's going to affect employment, etc. But I think it's a strength, like I kind of said earlier, because I believe that we've learned so many IT skills throughout the year. So I believe our grades reflect what we can do.
You're obviously so proud.
I'm so proud of her. I'm excited. Just can't thank God enough. Thank you, Jesus.
The results here at this academy in Nottingham reflect the national picture. In England, those getting top marks have reached a record high at nearly 45%, and it's slightly higher in Wales and Northern Ireland. Girls have done better than boys, perhaps because they perform better under continuous assessment than exams.
I got 4 A stars, so yeah.
I got 3 A stars and an A.
That's brilliant. Are you disappointed with the A?
Slightly, yeah.
The Education Secretary has defended this year's results, saying these students deserve to be rewarded after the disruption they faced. After last year's controversial algorithm was axed, their grades were assessed by their teachers instead of exams.
Did your teachers give out too many A's and A stars?
The title teacher assessed grades is potentially a little bit misleading. It makes it sound like there's one teacher sat in a room by themselves who's kind of made this grade up for what they think should be right. And actually, it's been much more of a rigorous and robust process than that. Every grade's been scrutinised. 2 teachers as a minimum have been involved in every student and every grade.
But the headlines about grade inflation don't tell the full story. Analysis suggests there are regional variations with implications for the levelling up agenda. Here in the Midlands, around 41% of students got top marks. In the North East, it was 39%, but in London, it was 48%.
We know that the pandemic exposed inequalities, and that's reflected in today's results. The increase in A grades was 50% higher amongst private schools than state schools. And black students and those on free school meals and those living in more deprived areas haven't done as well as their more advantaged classmates.
The pandemic has been a generational level challenge for educational equality and levelling up. And this is consistently something we've seen over the last 18 months, where the impacts of COVID-19 have had differential impacts on different types of students, facing different types of challenges in the home. And that's had huge consequences for their learning. And we're seeing the results of that today.
You're through to Nottingham Trent University Clearing Call Centre. How can I help you today?
What will these disparities mean for the futures of young people? On the other side of Nottingham, the Clearing Call Centre at Trent University. There's a concern that the record A-level grades will squeeze access to popular courses. Some institutions who are struggling to cope with the number of applications have offered free accommodation and even discounts for students to defer for a year.
At peak, we'll have 200 people who can take calls.
Some unis have been criticised for still only offering online lessons, with suggestions they should be offering a discount. The Vice-Chancellor here says there are some courses for which a blend is better.
There is some material we've learned in the last 12 months is better done online than in person, and students agree. And when that's the case, you'll mix the in-person with the online, and that's blended learning. But the focus will be on the in-person.
Whatever the controversy over their grades, after such a challenging year, most students will simply be celebrating having made it through.
Darshana Soni. But in Scotland, pass rates in Highers and Advanced Highers have slipped since last year. But they're still far above pre-pandemic levels, as the country's Education Secretary praised students for achieving such strong results, quotes, under extraordinary circumstances, while a record number of Scottish students have been awarded university places there. Our Scotland correspondent, Kieran Jenkins, is in Glasgow. Kieran.
John, yeah, after the fiasco of Results Day in Scotland last year, less drama today. Most students kind of knew their results back in June, and that's because they were based on teacher assessments rather than formal exams, although there has been some criticism that they amounted those assessments to exams in all but name in any case. But it's meant that, like last year, although not quite as high as last year, the overall pass rate for hires in Scotland is way higher than pre-pandemic levels. Also, the difference between the richest and the poorest, the attainment gap that we keep hearing about, narrower these days than it was pre-pandemic. Although progress had somewhat stalled before the pandemic, and you'll remember that Nicola Sturgeon famously said that that was the defining mission of her government, closing that gap. And this year, that gap got a little worse than last year. Here's the Scottish Education Secretary.
So we are seeing progress to tackle the poverty-related attainment gap. We've seen reports just published in March which have demonstrated good evidence that that is happening, but we know we need to do more, we know we can do more, and the government is absolutely committed and determined to do that.
Also in March, as it happens, Audit Scotland published a report on closing the attainment gap, and they found that progress had been limited and fell short of the Scottish Government's aims. So results this year and last year, a bit of an outlier, but on that key measure that Nicola Sturgeon wants to be judged on, by her government's own admission, plenty of work still to do.
Kieran Jenkins in Glasgow.
Well, earlier I spoke to the Universities Minister, Michelle Donnellan, and I began by putting to her that if, as her boss, Gavin Williamson, said, you can't compare these results to any other year, then doesn't that defeat the point of the exam system?
Well, this is an unprecedented year. We couldn't run exams because of the challenges that students had faced. So we consulted widely, including universities, teachers, parents and pupils. In fact, we received the highest number of contributions to any consultation that the department has ever run before. And we devised a scheme where we're placing our trust in teachers to assess these grades based on the evidence, the work that students have done. And we've received some fantastic results today, which have unlocked the opportunities of the next stage in these students' lives.
But if the Secretary of State goes around saying you can't compare these results to any other year, he instantly devalues them.
No, I totally disagree. The Secretary of State is on record talking about the value, in fact, of these qualifications that thousands of students have achieved despite all the challenges that they've faced.
So just to be clear, there are twice as many A and A stars this year as there were before the pandemic. Is an A or an A star this year worth the same as one before the pandemic?
So those students that are getting an A or an A star today are getting just that. An A is an A and an A star is an A because they are based on evidence. They're based on the work that students have done and then teachers have assessed. And nobody should be diminishing those results that they have achieved through hard work and determination.
It's no thanks to the department, though, is it? I mean, it wasn't until really Easter this year that students really understood how they were going to be assessed. You didn't publish your consultation results until the end of February. Schools then had to work out what they were going to do. Students didn't know how many assessments they were going to sit. It's been an absolute fiasco.
We planned to do examinations, but then when schools had to be shut for the second time, that obviously became impossible. So we consulted widely to co-author the plan, along with universities and pupils and teachers and parents, and then we communicated that widely.
When Gavin Williamson wanted to go ahead with exams, he said the problem with teacher assessment was that ethnic minorities and disadvantaged students tended to do better under exams because they faced discrimination when teachers were left to assess. What steps did he take to ensure that that didn't happen? And what do students do now if they feel they have been discriminated against?
So we placed our trust in teachers because they are best placed to know the work of those students, and they've assessed it based on evidence. There's lots of checks and balances within the system.
But that's not what he said last year.
A head teacher has to sign off on the documentation.
I mean,
so I'm telling you what we've done to ensure, your question was, how did we ensure that there was no bias and there was no discrimination within the system? What we did was we introduced a number of checks and balances within that, and a number of centres were actually assessed on the grades that they had inputted into the system to ensure that it is fair. There is an appeals process should a student feel that they haven't got the result that they deserve, and UCAS have delayed their deadline in which universities have to make those final decisions to September the 8th, just to ensure that nobody's future is curtailed if they feel that the system hasn't proved successful for them.
The Secretary of State is this morning saying that the universities should consider cutting fees if they're not going back to full-time, face-to-face education. Is that what the government now wants to see?
So what the government have done is remove all restrictions for face-to-face teaching in the autumn. So it means that universities are free to do full face-to-face teaching, both in the lecture halls and the seminars, and that no university should be curtailing face-to-face learning on the basis of COVID.
Right, and so will you support students who then demand a fee reduction if universities refuse to do all their teaching face-to-face?
So we've got to remember that students are consumers. They have consumer rights. And the Office for Students, as I said, the regulator, have been very clear that universities should be communicating what students can expect. So if a student gets to university and what they've been told to expect is different to what they actually get, yes, they may well have a case.
And how many more university places will there be as a result of so many people doing well this year?
Well, we know that there'll be record numbers of university places this year, including in some of the most competitive courses like medicine and dentistry. So only a few years ago, the number of places was around about 6,000. Now we're looking at about 9,000. That's a substantial increase in some of the most competitive and highly sought-after courses.
You'll have noticed a lot of these questions have been about Gavin Williamson. Do you recognise it's really hard for me to hold Gavin Williamson to account when he's boycotting Channel 4? He's done interviews with every single other channel this morning, but he's got a problem with Channel 4 News.
Look, I can't comment on that. I'm here today and I'm answering your questions, and I'm delighted to appear and look forward to appearing again on another topic.
Yeah, and we're delighted to have you. Thank you. But do you understand it's impossible to hold the government to account when the government minister won't appear and has never done an interview since he became Education Secretary?
Well, I'm the Minister responsible for universities. A huge volume of students receiving their A-levels and vocational qualifications today will be then going to university. Well, I work very closely with the Minister for School Standards, and I'm here today discussing the topics and celebrating in the fantastic achievement of so many students and teachers.
So you don't know why we're the only channel he won't talk to today?
The Secretary of State has appeared on numerous TV shows today, but I think what people really want to talk about today is these results, which will unlock that next step in so many young people's lives, be that university, apprenticeships, further education. And despite the challenges, that is the reality of today.
Michelle Donlan, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.